Well, good morning from the UK to all our many viewers around the world. As the chairman of the British-Kazakh Society, it gives me enormous pleasure to welcome you all to this important BKS webinar focused on Central Asia C5, an external view. The British-Kazakh Society aims to promote the best of relations between the UK and Central Asia. This mission includes highlighting trade and investment opportunities and promoting cooperation between government, industry and finance. We also place a very strong emphasis on promoting understanding of international affairs, geopolitics and diplomacy. So this webinar very much falls within our remit. The UK plus C5 concept is, in my view, critical to UK relations with Central Asia, given the significant geopolitical importance of Central Asia and the war in Ukraine. C5 interaction involving partnership around resilience, security cooperation, trade and investment, energy, natural resource security and including agriculture and connectivity, principally the Middle Corridor, provides significant benefits for all parties. The C5 format for dialogue presents many strategic opportunities. We're particularly grateful to His Majesty's ambassadors for Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan for gathering at this important BKS webinar. These speakers all have very special insights about the role and influence of the C5 partnership. Special thanks to Nigel Gould-Davies for moderating, and to BKS Director David Skeels for bringing us all together for this forum. Special thanks also to Alijan, our BKS Membership Manager, for his key role. So thank you all. Let us proceed, and let me pass you over to David. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rupert, for that very nice introduction. Just two housekeeping items before we get into the body of the event. The webinar will be video recorded and available on the BKS website for members after the event. For your language preference, choose Russian or English at the base of your Zoom screen. There's a little small globe down there. So, as Rupert mentioned, we have a unique panel today. All 5 British ambassadors located in the region, together with a highly skilled moderator. And I'm delighted to say we're really very excited to note this all-star team has drawn the highest registration of any BKS webinar. So our moderator today, Nigel Gould-Davies, is Nigel Gould-Davies. Nigel has lived and worked in the region, including in the energy sector, and has held several diplomatic posts, including ambassador to Belarus. Currently, he is with the International Institute of Strategic Studies in London, and there we go. Nigel, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dave. Thank you very much, Rupert. Good morning in London, good afternoon in Central Asia. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all to this rare alignment of the diplomatic planets. It's really a wonderful opportunity to have the ambassadors of all 5 countries together to share their thoughts over the next hour. Now, Central Asia as a region has sometimes been described or viewed as less than some of its parts because of constraints and limitations of connectivity. That's been true within the region, between the individual countries of Central Asia. I remember a few years ago, I had to fly from Astana to Ashgabat via Istanbul. It took it took a whole day to do so. And there are many other examples of the challenges of limited connectivity between the countries. It's a point that's also been made about the region's relationship to the wider world. This is a region that's far from major maritime ports. And in the case of Uzbekistan, we have one of a very small number of double landlocked countries in the world. Now, all this has been changing in the past few years, especially since 2016. We've seen new projects supporting connectivity by road, rail, and other means within the region. We've seen ambitious projects being sponsored to support its connectivity to the wider world, whether that's the Middle Corridor, the New Silk Road, or some of the north-south vectors of connection that are currently being explored. Where there's connectivity, there's trade and investment, and therefore this is a subject of interest to us all. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our ambassadors who will be speaking this morning. I will invite them to speak by alphabetical order of country. So we will start with Kazakhstan, and I invite Ambassador Kathy Leach to offer a few remarks. I just add that Kathy and I have known each other 20 years. We served in the embassy in Moscow together, and in fact, when she completed her post, I took over her 2 cats. So Kathy, over to you.
Apologies. Yeah, apologies for that problem. I'm now joining you on my phone since my computer connection has decided to give up the ghost. So forgive me for missing your introduction, Nigel, but I hope all is I hope my comments are going to make sense to everybody. Essentially, on the connectivity theme, what I wanted to say about Kazakhstan was, but really a connectivity policy, a multi-vector policy, as Kazakhstan likes to call it, has been in Kazakhstan's DNA since independence. It's really been determined to be friends with everybody, to be a globally responsible citizen, to start lots of regional initiatives, both international ones, like being part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization or the Organization of Turkic States, but also regional ones as well. So the C5 idea has been very much driven by Kazakhstan, and I think we see Kazakhstan very much positioning itself as a wanting to be a regional leader. So and there are a couple of policies right from the start that where Kazakhstan really showed that it wanted to be a country that connected to the outside world. Of course, President Nazarbayev's key decision 30 years ago to bring everyone into the tent in the crucial oil and gas investment projects, including the UK company Shell, but also, of course, Total, Eni, Exxon, Lukoil, CNPC, Chevron. But also I would really flag the education policy 30 years ago to establish the Bolshak Scholarship, which for the last 30 years has sent Kazakhstan's best and brightest to the top 200 universities around the world to do master's programs. And the UK has benefited from that. We've had about a third of those scholars, and that's now a cohort of around 6,000 scholars in Kazakhstan speaking fluent English, Russian, Kazakh, who we now see as ministers, as heads of organizations, as entrepreneurs, really helping to connect Kazakhstan to best world practice. And then I think the final kind of connectivity policy for Kazakhstan was the development of the Astana International Financial Center, the brainchild around 7 years ago. Now, over the last 4 years, really operational, and the court in particular connected to the Astana International Financial Center has been a huge success, with over 2,500 cases heard, all completed and enforced by Kazakh courts, mostly actually seen through the arbitration center, through mediation rather than through court proceedings, but there have been court proceedings too. So all of this helps to explain why Kazakhstan has an economy around a fifth to a third bigger than the rest of Central Asia combined, and has very deep and mature economic and financial relationships. The EU is its main trading partner, actually. Russia used to be in second place, now overtaken by China, Russia in third. And the UK, I think we're up there in the top 10 in terms of trading partners, around 2.6 billion of trade turnover a year. Largely metals and minerals going to the UK. So Kazakhstan's now reached upper middle income status actually back in 2006. But of course, as this seminar is about the C5, the missing bit of growth in the region has been around regional integration. And interregional trade is a really small fraction of the trade done in Central Asia. Kazakhstan sends only about 8% of its exports to Central Asia. Cross-border procedures, even between Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, which are both members of the Eurasian Economic Union, are not smooth. You often see great queues of lorries trying to come through, and paperwork between the different countries remains non-digital, very slow. Inefficient monopolies make transport connections between the different countries also slow and expensive and subject to bottlenecks. And I think it's fair to say that the economies at the moment aren't kind of complementary. They're not working together. They're not showing kind of integration of trade or manufacturing in the way that you might see in Europe, where you have really high volumes of interregional and intra-industry trade, actually. You don't yet see like value-added supply chains building up across Central Asia. And in general, we've still got quite low levels of added value across the region. And Central Asia as a region isn't yet well integrated into global value chains. It's still very much an exporter of commodities in a fairly unprocessed state. So there's a lot that can happen to really change that picture. And of course, the wider context, the political context, means that there are some key threats and opportunities for the region. I mean, of course, the key threat is the impact of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the huge challenge for the region of not being a backdoor to sanctions circumvention. I mean, on this, I have to say Kazakhstan has really been a very important partner for us in working on making sure that doesn't happen. But of course, the sanctions issue helps to add blockages, checks, risk. But also, of course, it's put a lot of focus on resilience, on regional resilience of important things like energy, water, logistics, digital infrastructure. And I think one of the main points for me today is to stress that I think there is a generational opportunity for Central Asia to think about regional resilience and modernization of these essential infrastructure projects. And that's partly because much of the infrastructure in the energy and water field particularly dates from the Soviet era and is now reaching 70–80% obsolescence. So all the countries of the region really need now enormous investment in their domestic energy and water and other critical infrastructure. And I'd say the other big opportunity right now is the fact that we've got better relations between the Central Asian countries than we've ever had before, and the motor, particularly the relationship between President Tokayev and President Mirziyoyev of Uzbekistan. That's a really crucial motor for looking at Central Asia integration. Now I'm going to focus on in my last few moments, particularly on Middle Corridor. The potential of the transit route through Central Asia from China to Europe, and then through the Caspian and on through the Caucasus to Turkey as an alternative route from China through the northern route through Russia to Europe. Now, in the last 8–9 months, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, World Bank, and OECD have all produced reports talking about the Middle Corridor and underlining its value. But the thing that I found interesting is that the point they all want to stress is that by some estimates, at least 60% of the value of the Middle Corridor actually would be in improving intra-regional trade within Central Asia, rather than from China-European transit, because it's always going to be hard for the Middle Corridor to compete on price. Given that it's multimodal, you have to put things on trains and then put them on boats and then unload them again and put them on more trains. So it's always going to be difficult for it to compete in terms of price and cost with the other alternatives for China, either going through Russia or going by sea. So So really, the interesting thing about these EBRD and OECD reports is the stress they put on the value to developing regionally integrated economies and really tackling the bottlenecks, really improving the transport infrastructure. And of course, another really crucial thing is to work on one interface, so that whether you're trying to book a through route from China to Europe, or whether you're looking at how to transport something from Tajikistan through to Kazakhstan, there's, as far as possible, one interface where you can book a through route, where the tariff charges are clear, where the timing and delivery is going to be clear. Now, for the sort of classic middle corridor, which is Kazakhstan through to the port of Poti in Georgia, you've got an intergovernmental agreement to set up one company that will manage that route. What you don't yet have is the agreement in place. It's getting the different interests involved in current port, border, railway infrastructure to agree what a common price and what a common approach would be. And that's still a work in progress, though I note that President Tokayev has just been in Baku in Azerbaijan, so I'm sure that this was absolutely top of the list of priorities. But without that clear one-stop shop, that one price, that guaranteed delivery time for that journey, it's going to be difficult to get private investors into building infrastructure. So for the time being, it's really the multilateral development banks who are the main proposed funders for much of this infrastructure. We're also seeing interest here from China and the Gulf. Have I used my time?
Thank you very much, Kathy. That's great. You've given us a lot to think about there. And in particular, in your last minutes there, looking forward to the generational investment needs that the country and the wider region faces, and connectivity will be needed to tackle those. And then some specific recommendations about, quite particular sort of logistic and tariff arrangements, the one-stop shop. So maybe we can pick those up in the Q&A to look ahead at what can be done. I'll turn now to our ambassador in Kyrgyzstan, Nick Bola. Over to you and your thoughts about from the Kyrgyz perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, hi, everyone. I'm Nick Bola, the ambassador in Kyrgyzstan, and this is actually my second time in the country. I was last here between 2015 and 2018, and it's very interesting how things have changed in many ways. And the headline I would give about Kyrgyzstan, as I think it's probably one of the lesser known countries in the region, is that it's a really interesting time for investors to come and take a look. And some first movers are already reaping rewards from that and seizing the opportunity that is starting to emerge here. So I'll say a bit more about that in the context, and then pick up on a few of the connectivity points that Kathy has already set out very well, and how they relate to Kyrgyzstan and where Kyrgyzstan fits in. Those who have heard of Kyrgyzstan, looking at it from an investor perspective, probably know it as having a historic reputation as a bit of a difficult place to come and do business for investors. And the nationalization of a large gold mine a few years ago, Kumtor, I think still casts a bit of a shadow over the country. But now, coming up to 9 months in my role here, in this role, and this time around, it's pretty clear to me that the authorities are setting out quite an ambitious vision to try and change this. There's a concerted effort to try and attract Western investment into the country. And from the UK perspective, this was driven forward by the Prime Minister when he was in London and met the Foreign Secretary in November and December last year. And he walked away from that visit having signed a really large export deal with a British firm, delivered a pretty good pitch to a group of financiers, and come in with a very clear request for support from us to help reform elements of the legal system and generally improve Kyrgyzstan's ability to attract investors. And I'll just say quickly 2 things we're doing, or 2 things we see that they're doing after that visit that might be of interest to try and follow through on those commitments that were set out. And the first is on that regulatory environment. We've had lots of follow-up conversations right up to prime ministerial level about exactly what we can do to bring more English law into the system. And those conversations have been really interesting. There's a sensible vision. It's ambitious but not outlandish. And interestingly, in one element of potential emerging connectivity, I think there's a recognition that the Astana International Financial Centre has an important role to play in that, which is very positive. And then the second area is on trying to pull through what would be really high-profile success stories of businesses succeeding. So particularly, again, focusing on the UK, there are big businesses and there are successful businesses operating here. Some of them have been for a long time. And now there's a focus on trying to increase that number and show that under this set of leaders, there's real commitment to making business a success in the country. So one of the companies that benefited from the visit to London last year have already started exporting here and are all set to open up a factory in the years ahead to produce their quite innovative product here. So that's a real win and a real positive sign. And another is in the mining sector with a British gold mining company just about to start work on exploiting a new gold deposit. So the UK, generally, we're really positive about this. We're ready to get behind the push and the effort to do more. And we're investing some of our time, our development assistance funds and our political efforts on those regulatory reforms we talked about. And also as an embassy, we're about to bring in more staff on the trade side, and we're ready to help put time and effort in to support British investors who do want to come here. One of the upsides for us of having a relatively small number of businesses in the country is that we can give quite a lot of attention to those who do want to come, where that makes sense for both sides. So before going on to connectivity, I'll just say the flip side of all of that is this is very early days. It's an ambitious vision. We are seeing signs of commitment and will to push it through, but it will take time for that to turn into results. And there are lots of well-known barriers and vested interest to overcome. Turning to connectivity briefly, I think Kathy painted a picture of the region really well, actually, and I pick up on three areas where that really overlaps with Kyrgyzstan. The first is energy and water. The first two are energy and water. One of the areas that the Kyrgyz authorities are very keen to bring more investment in on is green finance and renewable energy, particularly in the hydro sector. There was a change to a law last year, it's worth looking up if you're interested in this stuff, that's made it much easier to invest in small hydropower plants. And that is now starting to take shape. There's some further legislative initiatives in the pipeline that I think will make it even easier to make investments in small hydro. And looking at what's been achieved in Tajikistan, to some extent, I think they're also pushing ahead with the plans to construct the Kambarata 1 mega dam project, which will provide energy not only to Kyrgyzstan, but also Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and for export through the Kasa 1000 electricity line 2. And actually thinking about the water impact would help with managing and regulating water supply into Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan too. So a bit of a double whammy if that one manages to get off the ground, although it is a very, very big project. And then the third area, because I think I'm probably at time, I'll rush through a bit quicker, is on logistics. And Kathy talked about Middle Corridor. Kyrgyzstan would stand to benefit from that. I think there are certainly projects in the EBRD's recommendation that make a lot of sense from the Kyrgyz perspective, including in the country. But the priority there is probably a long proposed China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan railroad that is also getting a bit of a push at the moment. So I will stop there, and finish just by saying it is a really interesting time to come and look at Kyrgyzstan. It's one of the smallest of the Central Asian republics, but they have big ambitions. Things are changing here. And for those with the right risk appetite, it could be a really interesting time to come and have a conversation with us.
Nick, thank you very much. Some very helpful themes there. Time to take a look at Kyrgyzstan. There's an ambitious vision in the country. The British Embassy is beefing up its support for trade and investment, and some resonance with some of the issues that Kathy addressed as well. The similar issues with logistics, the importance of that, but also your reference to the Astana International Financial Centre, based in Astana, but also valuable for Kyrgyzstan too. That's very interesting. Thank you. Next, over to Tajikistan and Ambassador Tim Jones.
We'll get onto the map in a brief while. because that really picks up the point that both Kathy and Nick have made on water and electricity. My sort of opening for this, for anyone interested in Central Asia, is really starting from Kathy's position and then just say, basically, Tajikistan is smaller, more inaccessible, and about 25 years behind what's going on in Kazakhstan, which is not a reason not to be interested. As Nick said, there is first mover advantage in getting here. But we are very much behind a curve which Kazakhstan is pioneering. But essentially, if you've got a model that works in Kazakhstan and you're looking for somewhere else to go on to, I think we're a promising place to have a look at. Connectivity, we really are at the end of the railway until independence, or in fact until the 2001 takeover of Kabul. There was no actual border crossing between Tajikistan and Afghanistan, even. It all went through Uzbekistan. And so the country does often feel quite cut off, and has, as the other Central Asian countries, been trying to expand its, as a multi-vector relationships in other directions. China has obviously moved in a large way, but there has been some UK action, especially in the mineral and mining sector, although at the moment at a very minor level. The big thing here is definitely hydro, as others, Nick referred to, mega dams. Already we have Nurek, which is a mega dam from the Soviet Union, which is one of the largest hydropower stations in the region. And the president is absolutely determined to finish the Rogun Dam project, which is a mega dam, probably finishing the dam by 2023, but then having to fill the basin. But a project that only makes sense as part of a regional power solution. And all the countries in the region are definitely power hungry, and managing power for all of them is a huge issue. You may notice from the changed background from when you logged on that I had to move. Where I was sitting simply to go somewhere where there was a more reliable Wi-Fi signal. And this is because at the moment we're having intermittent power outages, because although Tajikistan is very proud to generate 93% of its electricity from hydro, what that means is that at this point in the year, when you've still got snow and the snows haven't started melting, so the rivers aren't running, and that means power is very short. So they do need to look at other sustainable power sources, and also not only Tajikistan, but taking it into the regional dimension that we were talking about today. The real challenge for the region is trying to manage its water and the energy resources that flow from water, and the impact of water on agriculture. All of which present massive challenges. And the World Bank has some amazing figures about how much the countries of the region could save if they could actually come up with an integrated energy market and connect their infrastructure, rather than at the moment sort of panic generate and throw as much coal as you can in the furnace when things get cold. Otherwise, Nick already mentioned CASA 1000, which is now in the process of being completed. We found a magic way in which this will be built across Afghanistan without rewarding the Taliban directly, enabling Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan to start exporting power commercially to Pakistan, which is not only economically beneficial for those countries, but also helps get Pakistan to generate less cheaper electricity, because they don't have to buy heavy oil from the Gulf, in addition to meeting climate goals. And that's, as a CASA 1000 is very much a trailblazer in what we hope might in the longer term turn into a more integrated regional energy market. Other than that, just a couple of things to mention briefly. Tajikistan is very pleased to have qualified for DCTS concessions. So it is a developing country from the point of view of trade concessions, and they are looking to see what they could do to take advantage in terms of developing exports to the UK. Probably processed agricultural products and textiles are the most immediately promising areas. As far as what the embassy is doing, as Nick described for Kyrgyzstan, a lot of our effort is around development projects to improve the economic operating environment. The flagship program is one called Effective Governance for Economic Development, under which we most recently sponsored some work to develop the legal framework here for internet governance and e-commerce. Because obviously, given the connectivity challenges we have, getting people connected to do business electronically is really the way out of the sack, or the way out of the cul-de-sac that we're in geographically. So that we hope now we're getting the framework in place. It needs some companies in there to actually start working with the framework. We have a small private sector development program managed between Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, which will be kicking off in the next few months in a bigger way. And people coming through that program, I'm sure, will want to be making connections into wider international markets. And as I hopefully being able to do that electronically. So I think that's it. That's the basic pitch. And as I returning to what Nick was saying, what the region really needs, and doesn't always understand that it needs, but really needs some success stories. And if people have success stories that have worked a little bit closer to the UK, then do bring them here, and we'll see what we can do to help. Thanks very much.
Thank you. That was very interesting, and there's some further important points you've shared with us. The two that jumped out most to me were the prospects of a regional energy market, actually, buying and selling electricity, and secondly, the idea that virtuality, that the internet and so on can overcome some of the geographical challenges. So it's the idea that the Earth is flat, that virtuality overcomes challenges of remoteness and mountains and all the rest of it. Really very, very interesting. Thank you. So on to Turkmenistan now, and Ambassador Stephen Conlon.
Thank you, Nigel, and good afternoon to everyone. So Turkmenistan, I've put up a map which shows where it is, because one of the things about Turkmenistan is not well known. But one thing that people tend to know about Turkmenistan, if they know something, is about the white buildings and the white cars in the capital. But we need to look beyond that. That's really an old myth. There is actually other colour cars here. They're beige and other colours. And the country is changing, and is changing for the better. As you can see, the borders, it's got borders with Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, but also with Afghanistan and with Iran. So it's a difficult neighborhood to the south and the east. And it's slightly, and then a border with the Caspian Sea. It's slightly smaller than Spain, but bigger than Sweden, Poland, and the UK. So it's quite a large country, but 80% of it is desert. And there's 7 million Turkmens in the world, but about 4 million or so in the country. 45% live around Ashgabat, which is the capital. And it's got the 4th largest gas reserves in the world, which is what it relies on, and some oil as well. It's a presidential system. There's a president, Serdar Berdimuhamedov, who was the son of the previous president, who has taken on the role. And he's been Western educated, and he's keen to move it forward. And like others have mentioned, the country is keen to open up to the West and to develop relationship with countries such as the UK. There's some positives and there are some challenges about doing business here, but I think there's some very good opportunities, which once you can overcome those challenges and deal with them, there's great opportunities there. So on the positive side, they're looking at WTO accession. They're keen to integrate into the world economy. There's a growing strength of English language. And I noticed there was a question in the chat bar about English language. And there's a great demand for English language schools here and English language testing, especially in youth, because it is a key for them to develop. And you notice that actually people below the age of 30, if they know a foreign language, it will be either Turkish or English. And there's a growing, there's less people speaking Russian. There's a large number that have studied abroad as well, in the UK, in Malaysia, in the US, and across Europe. There's a can-do attitude. People are very keen to find solutions despite some of the challenges that people face. And relationships matter. People will go out their way to help you and to try and cement the deal, and try and look how they can overcome things. And there are more foreign companies operating here, particularly Turkish companies, which may be an easier way to enter the market for UK companies to work with those Turkish companies supplying equipment into the company. But there are some challenges which I should mention. One is about foreign currency. There's dual exchange rates here. There is a lack of consistent application of legislation, and it's not always easy to find out what is the current legislation. And there is contradictory interpretation across the country. And there is sometimes idea about command economy thinking, particularly in the older generation, but the younger generation, particularly those who've stayed abroad, recognize the opportunities and know how business work. And you can see it in, there was a recent Turkmenistan investment forum in the UK, where the presentations were really pitched at business and highlighted the different selling points of Turkmenistan, and not just expecting that governments will tell companies to move. It's much easier to get private sector business than government contracts. Government contracts, though quite lucrative, it does tend to have a higher barrier in terms of the paperwork that needs to be completed. The visas need to be connected, applied for, and there is difficulty on internet. There is unreliable internet access. It can be quite slow to download and to keep in contact, but it is getting better. And also all communication between foreign entities and the Turkmenistan government need to go through the foreign ministry under cover of a diplomatic note, which does tend to slow down business and does sometimes hamper things. But once you've established that framework through the Turkmenistan government, you find it easier to operate. And as Other mentions, logistics, getting goods into the country. Mainly it comes across now the Caspian Sea because of the Ukraine war, the war in Ukraine. And it's very much, that does slow down things. So some companies have told me it adds 6 days to their shipping. But I'll move on to some of the opportunities which are around infrastructure. One of the big infrastructure projects in the country is the Karakum Canal, which was built in the Soviet days, but is now showing its age. It's leaking a lot of water. It needs desilting, and there's a high level of evaporation. So the government here are very keen to modernise that canal because the main source of water that comes into the country, and you imagine that 80% of the country being desert, there isn't much water here, although today is actually raining, which is, I think, about the 8th time it's rained since I've been here since May. And there is poor water management here. So I think there's a real opportunity for companies that offer water management solutions, particularly around agriculture, because there is only under 20,000 square kilometers of irrigated land in Turkmenistan. And a lot of the water flows down from Afghanistan, and Afghanistan's building a canal which is even further reducing the amount of water coming into the country. And the traditional crops of cotton are very water intensive. There's also opportunities around improvement of oil and gas infrastructure, particularly some of the pipelines where there's methane leaks, which are having devastating effects on the global climate. There are also rail and road opportunities. The Turkmen are very keen to upgrade their rail capacity across the network, linked to the Trans-Caspian, the Middle Corridor plans. And one of the ideas is about shipping across the Caspian Sea is to the port of Turkmenbashi, formerly Krasnodar, which is one of the few ports in the region that is under capacity. But part of that under capacity is because it needs also desilting and clearing so that deeper ships can get into port. And there's also, they're very keen, as you imagine, having lots of gas, to look at opportunity around blue hydrogen as well. But that's all I'll say for now, and I'll hand over to others to speak. Thank you. And there's the contact details of my colleague Eldar, who works in the trade team here, that if you have any queries, you can approach him directly. Thank you.
Stephen, thank you very much. That's very helpful. And again, some resonances with themes we've already heard, including logistics seems a persistent challenge, water as well. We introduced the possibility of a Trans-Caspian route as well, and that's a further vector of connectivity we perhaps can explore. You began by saying it's a difficult environment, a difficult sort of neighborhood, I think you said. And that puts me in mind of one of Catherine's remarks about the war in Ukraine and the fallout that it's having. So maybe there's something to explore nearer the top of the hour about geopolitics and the ways that might be hindering plans to deepen connectivity and how we might get around that. Finally, it's a great pleasure to turn to Tim Smart in Uzbekistan. And again, mindful of the arc of this conversation, Kathy began by talking about the importance of the bilateral relationship between the two presidents, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, in supporting closer connectivity. And I saw you nod at the time, and you're nodding again. So please offer the Uzbek perspective for us. Thank you.
Nigel, fellow panel members, guests, thank you so much, and to the Society for inviting. But there's a lot of resonance, as others have said, in Uzbekistan, a huge desire to connect, diversify international partnerships, focus on education, work together on water and energy infrastructure. The country is also rich in natural resources, including critical minerals. And it's rightly proud of its ancient history with the 8 cities of Samarkand, Khiva, Bukhara. And in terms of its economic overview, it's got encouraging macroeconomic data, GDP of 81 billion in 22, 6.5 GDP growth in 2023, 6.5 GDP growth predicted in 2024 by the EBRD. It's also got the largest population of 36 million, that is, say, about 45% of the overall population of Central Asia. And it's a young population of over 60% of that is under 30, getting well educated, really interested in international education and degrees, with English at the forefront of that. As Nigel was mentioning and Kathy has mentioned, it's now part of the central part of the connectivity between the two presidents. But under President Mirziyoyev's predecessor, Karimov, it was an isolationist state that hindered regional integration. And this has all changed since Mirziyoyev came to power in 2016. He spearheaded a rapid and ambitious reform program with education and regional international connectivity at its heart. Economically, this is focused on privatization, the attraction of foreign investment, the liberalization of tariffs for industries, and the privatization of 30 of the country's state-owned enterprises and banks in the years ahead. As others have mentioned already, the middle and southern corridors are a real priority here. This double landlocked country knows that it can't use manufacturing as the basis of its sustained growth to really focus on a stable future for this young population. And in that, the digital economy, infrastructure, taking advantage of its natural resources in a fair and equitable way is at the core of what the President's Reform Programme is about. As such, and if I can focus a little bit, transport infrastructure is a sector where probably I'd like to say a little bit more. The challenges created by being double landlocked are large, and how the country is working around that is it's looking for opportunities to connect regionally through the corridors already mentioned. And last week, the Uzbekistan's private public-private partnership project pipeline was increased from $17 billion to $30 billion by 2030. And several of these projects are in the transport infrastructure sector in areas such as road, rail, and in airports. And when I talk to British companies, British ministers, particularly interested in working in partnership with Uzbek hosts and other international partners, for example, in Turkey, where we've come together to meet the need of this growing population, this increased connectivity in the region. In also support UK export finance has between £2 and £3 billion of market appetite to support UK exports in Uzbekistan, and that's largely untapped so far. So an opportunity to take preferential rate out on loans for deals in which at least 20% of the content and costs of the project are taken on by British companies, but that's 80% which can be taken up by others. Obviously, we'd like more. We've also doing more ministerial visits in the last 12 months. We've seen several ministerial visits here. We're expecting future high-powered visits on the cards coming. And the Uzbeks want more, and we want to meet that appetite because this region matters to us. And in terms of the staffing of my embassy, we've doubled the UK number of diplomats. We're now at 12. And a huge focus in terms of expanding the Department for Business and Trade office, which has a regional remit again. That team has expanded. And we support fully the President's decrees to establish an international commercial court, looking at the success of Kazakhstan's International Financial Centre. Again, will be based on English common law. It's something we would hope to see later this year. And certainly the President's most recent decree has put that ambition very clear. And looking ahead, I'd like to note that the Tashkent International Investment Forum will take place from the 2nd to 3rd of May this year and provides an excellent opportunity to understand more about the market and the priority sectors. And again, the embassy team here and in the region can support companies looking to engage with Uzbek stakeholders and find other partnerships in the region. So to me, there's a couple of key points. Yes, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan are largest countries, but they work together with their Central Asian counterparts. The water and energy sectors are particular areas of interest where we can help with them on the connectivity. And that's not just us in the UK, but other partners as well, where we can help in a way which greens the economies and helps them move away from carbon-heavy economies and look at greening electrical infrastructures. And education is a key area where I think, again, as others mentioned, we really are supporting. For over 20 years, similar in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan has been sending over 100 students a year to the UK to study master's programs. They are back here. They are in ministerial positions. They're in presidential administration. They are in business. They are in civil society. They are across the sector, and they are influential. They understand us, and they want to do more business with us. We want to help them. And key to this is foreign direct investment to a prosperous and stable future. And in that, the diversification of international partnerships, both business and bilateral, is key to the development of this country. And the President is clear about that. The old way of models don't work for him. He needs to diversify these partners, and we're fully on board. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Tim. An awful lot there, as with the other presentations, and these themes, in particular of the greening of the economy, support for that, for education, they seem to recur. Your point about the International Commercial Court, again, a glance back to the successful UK precedent in Astana for that. That's very interesting. You also paint the larger picture of a large young country with tremendous potential, and you're rapidly expanding the embassy to reflect that. We have about 8 minutes for questions, and lots have come in. So I'm just going to throw some of these out, and let's get some really sort of quick, crisp answers. So here's one about English language training. So here's someone asking, how important is this in terms of supporting ambitions of internationalization and for strengthening the UK as a partner? That's English language training. That's one question. I'll throw out a couple here. A second question from Neil Carmichael. What can the UK do to encourage the development of a regional energy market? I think Tim Jones, you touched on that, but you may want to expand on that, and others may have thoughts as well. And a third question about the middle corridor from Matthew Gray. It says this was originally promoted by the UK and the West as a means to circumvent Russia. Now it seems the focus is shifting from being a corridor to being a regional web of connectivity, playing catch up with Chinese integrated infrastructure. So there we have it, a question about English language, a question about regional energy markets, and a question about the middle corridor. Who would like to kick off? Kathy, you're first up, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to answer the question on English, because I didn't get onto English in my intervention, but I think all, certainly for Kazakhstan, but I think for all countries, English as a very definite, in some cases second, but in Kazakhstan's case third foreign language is incredibly important, and we're seeing a huge appetite here for English language education, and particularly in as well as improving English language provision at secondary. The really big change for Kazakhstan is really pushing into this transnational education market, so bringing in a whole new generation of foreign partners to develop often English language, sometimes other language courses. But what this will do is create a big pressure to, again, increase the amount of English language teaching and English language faculty to teach at these universities as they increase that offer. So yeah, I think I only see the appetite for English and all the kind of associated business opportunity and commercial opportunities for UK universities and educational providers increase. I think it's a really important moment for English.
Excellent, thank you. Would anyone else like to address any of these questions? Okay, a rapid, I think the two Tims actually. So start with Tim Jones, then on to Tim Smart.
Yeah, no, quickly, perhaps first on the regional energy market. I mean, this is a medium-term aspiration, clearly, but the World Bank has done some modeling on it. The initial steps in it, kind of CASA 1000 already is there. That's already linking, as say, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, going down into Pakistan through a single connector. There's a kind of other deals coming up at the edges that might get welded into something more more common as things proceed. So at the moment, there's a deal between Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, under which Tajikistan exports cheap hydro when the rivers are flowing in full flood, in return for cheap gas in the winter. And those kind of deals, as especially the countries, the bigger, more populous countries become more and more energy demanding, is going to grow and grow. And certainly, in order to finance the Rogan Dam, and this I think is the next piece of the action, is a project the World Bank is currently knitting together, because they're looking, they think they've got the money, but you have to be a bit careful about this still. But 6.2 billion going into the Rogan Dam, as say for completion of the dam in 2023. But that will only finance, the financing only works if they have a commitment from Uzbekistan to buy that power. But that's green power, and as green energy becomes more sought after, especially as people are faced with things like carbon border adjustments, exporting into the UK or Europe, then being able to show you're producing the green power will also grow in importance. And as I say, I think it will be probably a patchwork of those deals, but then eventually we would encourage, I mean, this is the opportunity for regional integration, is for the countries then to look at these deals and work out that actually what they need to do is really get together and put that on a more organized basis. And I think support for that would be very important, but it's a medium term important, not a tomorrow one. And just very briefly, as Kathy said on English, I mean, here the president's told all civil servants they now have to be able to speak 2 foreign languages, and they all speak Russian. So the other one everyone knows is English. And just briefly, because I was following the chat, just another thing perhaps to pick up maybe for the next seminar, mentioning Azerbaijan, it's worth, I think, commenting that Azerbaijan got invited to the last 2 summits that the C5 countries themselves organized. So the idea of bringing Azerbaijan in is definitely in the room. Thanks.
Looks like you spotted Ambassador David Moran's question, which I do want to ask as well. He knows the region extremely well, of course. But other Tim Smart, did you? Yes. Oh, you did.
Thank you. Look, just 3 quick points on the education, largely echoing exactly what Kathy and Tim have said, that the focus here is massive on English education. I think the president would like a British council office in every single major town and city in the country, and I'd love to be able to give that for him. It's going to be difficult, but what we can do is support those links across to international education partners, over 30 tertiary education universities have partnerships. About 30 have partnerships, and more are coming and interested. I'm told anecdotally during COVID that actually English language was put on the televisions here for people to learn. The president understands that for a connected society here, and I guess in the region, English language is language of business, and it's really important for a future of a double landlocked country who can't do the manufacturing model, and it's showing through in the investment in the IT parks, etc. He's got it. We can give more detail of that offline. And lastly, in the schools, secondary school, I think primary schools, Cambridge University press textbooks are being used to get the English language across, mandated from the president. This is a key driver for him.
Excellent, thank you. Nick, you've done it the old-fashioned way with an electronic hand.
I have, yes. But I'd say simply that everything said on English is the same in Kyrgyzstan in terms of demand and importance and recognition of that. And then just building on the point on energy markets, it seems to me that as three things intensify, the pressure to make regional energy markets work is going to really help us make that a reality. The first is the growing trust between the countries. We didn't talk about the fact that Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan signed a border deal the end of 2021, start of 2022, talking about things that are different from when I was here before. When I left, there were Uzbek tanks skirmishing into Kyrgyzstan, and when I came back, that deal had been signed. So it shows you just how possible change is. Of course, the Kyrgyz-Tajik border negotiations still underway, but the momentum behind greater trust across the region, I think, is growing. The second is the need. The impact of climate change, growing economies mean that just simply the demand for energy is going to grow. Tim talked about rolling blackouts. We have them in Kyrgyzstan too. That's not something any government or population wants. And then the third is the reality for investors. And the investors I speak to looking at coming to the energy sector here see the ability to export as really crucial to making deals commercially viable. So my crystal ball gazing is that as those three things intensify in years to come, that's going to be a big driver for those regional energy markets, which will be a huge step forward.
Excellent, thank you. I know we're just about out of time, but if anyone has just 30 seconds, they could offer a response to, again, Ambassador David Moran's question. He's asking whether COP29 in Baku could be an opportunity for the region, including Central Asia, to make progress on the clean energy agenda. It does seem a natural opportunity. Who would like to offer thoughts? Okay, Nick, is that a new or old hand, Nick?
It's old. I can't figure out how to put it down.
Okay, Kathy's champing at the bit, I think. Far away.
Yeah, no, I see COP29 as a big opportunity, and I think as Azerbaijan has already been flagging, it wants to do something on the region, and I certainly have been talking to colleagues in London in our department for net zero about that very thing. So quite what that looks like, I think, is under discussion. Certainly trying to bring the big players into the Energy Transition Council is one of the ideas, but I think it's an opportunity to raise ambition in the short term. We've got some big commitments long term, net zero by 2060, but it's the short term decisions that matter. And if we can help with advice on policy frameworks, on approaches, then that's all to the good. And as Stephen flagged, there's also a lot of work to do for the oil and gas producing countries on methane. So I think lots and lots of work that I'm looking forward to.
Excellent, thank you. And with that, I'm afraid we're out of time. We could continue the conversation much longer. There are lots of questions we haven't got to, particularly about education. One from Dr. Okeke asking Tim whether there's going to be a chance for British Council in Dushanbe. You'll need to handle all those offline, or we'll follow up with another event like this in due course. But that's enough from me. Just to say, I think the collective noun of ambassadors is excellence. And excellence of excellences, and back to Dave then to round us off.
Wonderful, thank you, Nigel. So I just like to express the appreciation for everyone who's contributed here, Rupert, Nigel, all those excellences who've contributed there. Alijan pulling the strings on this in Astana, and Aida in Almaty interpreting. Just to briefly talk about some of our future events, you can't get away from this. We have actually a very interesting one for the Kazakh audience tomorrow, where we have a webinar on cameral tax issues which will be a very important subject in Kazakhstan. That's tomorrow, and on the day after tomorrow in London, we have an in-person event on trade and investment with Ambassador Magjan Ilyasov, and a great panel, and also hosted by Field Fisher in their actually wonderful offices in London. We have we touched on water. We have a webinar on water and mining at the beginning of April. And going back to English and education, we have two events with David Hardy in May. One is From School to University, and the other one is about Chevening scholars and their experiences. So with that, I encourage you to look at the website, join as a member if you haven't already, and we see you at the next event quite soon. Thank you. Bye now.
Bye all.
Thank you.